So, Neil, it's fantastic to be with you today. I've been so looking forward to this conversation. Hey, look, I've seen you on stage a number of times at the Comedy Store, which you co-founded a few years ago now, as well as being watching you on TV in your comedy and acting roles. And now you do even more. You advise companies from the likes of Google, Deloitte, the Marketing Society, Accenture, and Unilever on all things communication, how to be more creative, confident, cogent, and with more conviction. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. I've loved your latest book, which I say I'm going to show here, but frankly, look, you've got it all behind you in the moment, which I loved. It is very practical, incisive. You can use, there it is for viewers. And I was already using it literally as I was turning the pages, which I think is a mark of a great book. So many, many congratulations on the book and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I really did hope the book would be practical. There are lots of academic books I like reading, and there are lots of motivational books that have got one good idea in them. I tried to put really what I've learned over the last 25 years into this book, from big sort of conceptual thing, life is an improvisation, leaders will never know what the script is that's emerging, as well as how to do a presentation, rehearse, have some notes, get there early, speak up, slow down. Very sort of granular moments as well as sort of bigger conceptual ideas.
No, it's brilliant. And I'm feeling even more self-conscious now in my communication style as we speak. But let's start there. I mean, because you are on stage still regularly, and obviously you advise all these great companies. When you're having a session, whether it's a podcast like this or giving presentation coaching advice, what's your mindset beforehand? How do you prepare in general terms?
I try not to be too tired, and I think about the moment, whether it's a day or today, just an hour or so. So I had a little rest beforehand today. I made sure I ate, but not too near the event. I put on a different shirt, so I'm kind of in the zone. And when afterwards, I'll go and put my pajamas on or get in the bath or something. So I've planned a pre-routine and a post-routine. And I always say to people, especially with a presentation or whatever, get yourself in the zone. Don't fill up your timetable beforehand. Rehearse, get in the place where you're going to stand, walk the stage, whatever it may be, even if it's virtual. And afterwards, have a little treat lined up so you're not going straight back into work, so that when you're in the presentation mode or the stressful mode, you're not thinking, I've got this other thing, I better just not give too much. And so there's a walk, a glass of wine, meeting up with friends afterwards, or silence. I like to decompress. And that was the problem with Zoom and Teams for me during the lockdown, was I'd finish my workshop and then I'd be down with the family and I wasn't quite sure who I was in a way. So I do physically put on a face and a shirt to separate the work. So I don't take it lightly. So I perform every Sunday with the Comedy Store players and everyone say, oh, come for lunch, whatever. And I'm kind of not very good company on Sunday. Although I've done it for nearly 38 years, I do have to prepare, think about I'm not preparing scripts, but I think about my body, my voice, relaxing, not making, oh no, I've got to get back from outside London to the Comedy Store in Piccadilly Circus. I can't be worrying about the kind of logistics, so that I can then be fully in the moment when I'm on stage with my pals.
It's so refreshing to hear such a really careful, thoughtful approach before, during, and afterwards. When I give speeches, more virtually now, but more in person when I was doing in the past, again, I found a lot of people kept coming up to me literally about 5-10 minutes beforehand, and I had to be polite but firm to say, "So I'm getting ready." And most of the people didn't get it. And I sort of thought, I'm just going to go and present to 100, 200, 500, whatever the number of people is. I take this very seriously. And they wanted to chat about the latest football match or something, which is lovely. I said, afterwards, very happy to. Now, I'm sort of in the zone, or at least trying to get into the zone.
And it's hard to explain that. I mean, to name drop for a moment, I hosted the International Coaches Federation about 10 years or more ago. And one of the speakers was Brené Brown. And of course, everyone knew her from TED Talks, and we're chatting to her. And I literally went up to say, Brené, can I just have a word with you? And I had to get her away. And I said, Brené, you need to get in the zone. And she said, thank you very much. But she hadn't yet got that sort of sense of for the bigger crowd, I need to step away from the individuals.
Mm.
However, after the event, we spoke for about an hour and a half, and I just taught her yes and as an idea. And she thought, what a great idea. Say yes and to life rather than yes but. But it's really hard to explain how stressful a performance is. And I'm saying this to people who don't perform. And I'm saying, do you know you're going to put yourself, once I read, the same amount of adrenaline is a car crash. And so don't make it a car crash. I was before an event and they say, oh, come and have dinner with us. I say, no, I'm going to be really bad company. I'll be grumpy and
Yeah.
surly. Yeah. I'll be thinking about what am I eating? Am I keeping my voice intact? Because you need to realize that this is a stressful thing. And this could be a presentation. It could be a job interview. It could even be just talking in a meeting. So I say things like rehearse a few lines, make sure that when you're in that moment, you're going to give of your best. Now, this sounds contradictory. I teach people improv, but I also say rehearse. Improv doesn't mean be disorganized. Improv doesn't mean just turn up. It means be alive, be in the moment. And there's a whole discipline and bunch of skills. And that's why I call it improv, not improvisation.
Yes, yes.
So there's a technique, there's a discipline, there's a bunch of protocols about trying to get the best and being fully aware, noticing rather than either trying to stick to a script or just going, I don't know what to say. I'll just say anything or I'll say nothing.
Fascinating. I mean, you work with a lot of executives and have done. A lot of them, even however successful they are, however big a title they have in their organisation, many still do stick to a script. And I wonder why. What's your observation from your work with them? Is it nerves? Is it lack of preparation, lack of skill? Or is it they don't think it's important enough compared to the real job elsewhere, whatever fictitious job that is?
Well, I think it's all of the above. When I say to people, rehearse so that it sounds natural, that's a bit of a logical jump. What do you mean? I'm going to say it multiple times beforehand so that it sounds real, like I've just thought it. Yeah, well, look at a stand-up comedian. She or he, they've got their material set. So I would say rehearse it when you need to. And there are moments when a leader does need to be fully rehearsed. I've seen some terrible presentations when they haven't been rehearsed. Mm-hmm. I see others who read out the script as if it is an essay and they are 12 years old. And that's no good either. Mm. So I'm as bold sometimes to say, if you're not very good at this, learn it, or maybe give it to number two. Because actually, yes. Because she may be better than you and your skills are elsewhere. Try to get a little bit up, just do 5 minutes or whatever. Spend, for 5 minutes, you might need 5 hours rehearsal. I'm told that's what people do. For every minute, you need an hour's prep, and that might be writing, re-rehearsing, rewriting. So it's really important, I think, to know what kind of zone you're in. Is this a moment when you're in a conversation where there's things emerging, things changing, you need to be nimble and changing? Or is it a moment when you need to be polished? You need to be ready. You need to build the troops up and say something that means they go away thinking we're in good hands here. Or there's a guy or a woman there with a really, clear plan. And that was being role modeled by the way she delivered the message.
So you have to judge the moment and then judge exactly how you play into it. If you are in the more expansive, creative moment, you referred to the yes and earlier. Tell me a little bit more about that approach and how that's different from, and how that helps, and how it's perhaps different from how other people interact.
Well, that's our improv thing. Yes, I hear what you say. Yes, I accept your offer and I build on it. Now, of course, yes and sounds good and friendly. Yes, but sounds negative. But we never actually say yes and on stage. It's our ethos.
Yes.
It's yes, your contribution matters. And I'm going to use that to move things forward. And we talk as improvisers, we're yes-anders. I'm yes-anding you now. So, for example, now, David, you just said, here's a thing. Now I took that and built on it. You're doing that constantly in life. We do it all the time with our friends, I think. There are some times when I've got to get my point across here, whatever she's saying. And I think, no, try and work with what she's given you. And that's why improvisers talk about the idea of an offer. An offer is something somebody gives you, you can do something with.
Yes.
And that could be a word, a concept, even body language, even a tone of voice, which is, I'm noticing you're not that keen on, the sales figures last year, or this project doesn't seem to excite you. Or actually, when you mentioned cheese, it got you more excited than motor cars or whatever.
Mm.
So that's yes and as a mindset. We do actually do it as a warm-up exercise. We play yes and to get people used to the idea of why wouldn't you and? Why wouldn't you? Yes. And Tina Fey, who's the wonderful producer, writer who did 30 Rock, Saturday Night Live, she has 2 pages in her book. The book is called Bossy Pants, an ironic take on being a woman in a very male world. She was the first female head writer on Saturday Night Live, but her 2 pages are, why wouldn't you say yes? Why wouldn't you accept somebody else's offer?
Yes.
And then why wouldn't you contribute? Now, of course, I point out that you might say no, but as a yes, and you're not negating the other's point of view. And in fact, Pixar Pictures, who did Wall-E, Toy Story, they talk about plussing, which is kind of yes and. You can't critique an idea unless you have a constructive way of moving it forward. And those of us who do improv week in, week out, we know that sometimes that offer isn't great or can't see where it's going to go, but it's going to get us to the next step. And a leader should be thinking all the time, am I more yesing? Am I more anding? Am I guiding the story or just supporting it because others have got great ideas? So that's when you get deep into yes and, there are stronger moments for yes, stronger moments for and. So for example, right now I'm anding. I'm just saying all the words.
Yes, no, I
You're
understand that.
yesing. You're yesing and nodding. And then next, if we're in a conversation, you might bring your yes and to my contribution. And I'd be thinking, oh yeah, of course, why not? What could I learn from David's different point of view?
It's fascinating that you refer to it being more of an ethos than a form of words. I remember a steering group of a very large project that I was running, and the CFO was very good at his equivalent of the yes and to CEO, who only really engaged if she heard the yes and. And there were colleagues, and by the way, after he did his equivalent of yes and, he would often challenge her very hard on what she thought, but she was engaged, she was listening. Whereas other colleagues were the no but, even though their point of view was better, she had shut down. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
So that mindset.
I think that's absolutely right. Herminia Ibarra says, for example, who's a wonderful researcher and professor at London Business School, Herminia Ibarra, says, if you are as a leader doing the yes and, there might be times to say yes, but we're going to do that. Yes, but we can't do that. Being directive, but you kind of earned it by opening up the ideas and the possibilities. And there are times when it's time to say, let's do this.
Yes. Where are the best moments where you've seen the improv skills and mindset overall play into work context, business context? Where have you seen it really, really motor and have a big impact? Is it everywhere, or are there specific places?
Well, I think there are moments when a team is together and they're listening, and I call it intentive listening, really listening, where the team is more important than the individuals. No matter who's got the hierarchy, who's got the status, ideas are welcomed and we're building on each other's ideas. I've seen that informally and formally. And of course, the best leaders are already doing this. They're very secure in their position, physically, mentally, emotionally. So they can say to the person who's not so experienced, that's a great idea. Let's move it forward. And very often I find it's those very senior people saying, come on, bring me ideas. I'm the boss, but don't be scared of me because I know very little about this, and you may have a different perspective that means we could create something new. We find an innovative way of getting through this. So that's generally the thing. When the conversation is everyone's part of it, people talk about brainstorming. Brainstorming is dangerous because that's the thing we're going to do in a locked room for a while.
Yes.
And then come back and get on with the job, business as usual. Or it's where somebody with a louder voice gets heard. Whereas yes and is where one story. Whoever's speaking right now, we need to listen to them. And also, yes and doesn't have to be spoken, especially in this world of virtual. What's going on in the chat? What's going on in the discussions in the corridor afterwards? Have we done clever things like, if you're the facilitator, spoken to people in advance of time, already finding their yes ands or their yes buts? When do they feel it's going to be a problem, and how could we overcome that problem? Or when do they think, actually, have you thought of this? And that's the main thing. Very simple example, a legal department of a big media company. They said it used to be sales, marketing, come to us on a Friday afternoon. Got this great idea. We're ready to launch on Monday. Yes. And legal, all they can say is, yes, but you can't do that. You can't do this. You can't. And they say to us, come to us earlier.
Yes.
Come to us way ahead of time. And this happens a lot in different organizations where the so-called, back office,
Mm.
compliancy, legal risk
Mm.
people don't get chance to be yes-anders. So somebody's thinking, I've got this vague idea. I think we could do this territory, this tariff, whatever. And the legal people say, well, you could do this, you could do that. And that's where it's most potent to me. Is there and I tease people who might be seen as the police officers saying, you can't do that, you can't do that. All they want to do is say yes and of course, it's very easy for the so-called apparently yes and people, creators and stuff, say, oh, it's those bad people in finance. It's all their problem. And you're actually yes butting them by not involving them, by not bringing them in early. So you can then, like a child, go, oh, if only it weren't for them. And that's a yes but to me. That's a block.
Mm.
Yes and is very broad. It basically says, I'm understanding this situation from somebody else's point of view. I'm open to my point of view being changed.
And when you're practicing that yes and approach, how do you make sure that your contribution, whether it is a genuine build or reframe or pivot, whatever it is really good? And the reason I ask that is there are people who I know who are really good at the philosophy of yes and, but frankly, it's just they add a tiny bit, and it's like those conference panels where people build on the point, and really they've added nothing. You think, just shut up. We could have said something. Said something new. And I'm trying to get into how do you fill your stock, if you like, of ideas, experiences? Is that practice? Is that preparation? I mean, give a quick example. I know a number of jazz musicians where they do practice a series of riffs, sometimes that are fillers, candidly, when they're trying to move from space to space, but they've got a stock of them. Now, that doesn't mean that they're playing, oh, I'm going to go and play this whole page of music, but it allows them to move into a new space. But also part of it is being in the zone that you referred to earlier. So how do you use the yes and as a great platform and fill it with your own brilliant creativity? I want to know all your secrets now, Neil.
Well, you're asking a lot because, frankly, fillers are okay. We keep the music going. From the rhythm will emerge a new pattern, perhaps some new solos. So I think it's okay to have fillers. And that's kind of what yes and is. If you think one idea is going to be it, that's a problem. And actually, the thing I noticed when teaching improv, we do one word at a time. For example, I went to the zoo. I saw a giraffe. And you can see some people thinking, only got one word, but it's going to be really good. It's going to... Yes. And they spoiled it because they're not listening. And so, to be honest, I would question the assumption behind your story. I mean, the panel is a different thing. That's kind of soloists.
Yes.
True. And you're not co-creating a story. You're having your opinion. It may be fine. Say, I just agree with David. That's okay. But it's interesting to use the metaphor of jazz because fillers you need sometime. Just keep the rhythm going. And my daughter is a brilliant musician. And I said, why do we like it so much when suddenly something pops out? The guitar goes and it's just the drum. Or the drum goes, and she says, because we like change. We're interested in that transformation.
Yes.
And then when it comes back, we go, oh, yeah, that kind of stuff. And so I think it's okay to just say, right now, we're just keeping it going. And the keeping it going could be simply somebody asking an unusual question. Somebody saying, well, at least it's not as bad as the X project, just to kind of keep the mood, if you like, the flow. Somebody saying, actually, let's go for a walk. These are the things where I would say don't try and make one offer that's going to transform everything. And this is why I cheekily call my book In the Moment, because I'm talking about in the moment theater that takes you in 3 seconds, you can move the story on. You've got to think in small moments of time. But actually, a moment in terms of an individual or a team, maybe 6 months, a year, as they decide, as the idea kind of germinates. You think, actually, do I want to be doing this? Where's a better horizon for me to look at? And so not every time in your life is of equal value.
No.
We know that. We spend 3 years in college, perhaps, and it may be only one moment was the thing that defined us or where we learned something. But actually, we've got to live with all the other moments as well. And even I would say this is that by going back to the presenting thing or being in flow, you can't be there all the time. There are
Yeah,
times,
that's
I'm
a great
sure,
point.
David,
Yeah,
when you want to nip out on a Saturday morning in your pajamas or your slippers, get a bottle of milk. And at that point, you don't want anyone to talk to you.
that's
You
right.
don't want to be nice. You don't want to be telling stories and then motivate. And that's fine. But the trouble is, often people think, well, that's how I am. For the sake of the audience, for the sake of the story, for the sake of your company, you've got to step in and put on that cloak of actually, I'm stepping up. And it may be tiring. So just in the way we notice, we unconsciously sort of downplay our presence. So because we're tired, like I do before an event, often I go to a conference where I'm speaking and I pretend to be one of the technicians, dress in dark clothes, just so I can earwig what people are saying. And I can play that role. I avoid eye contact. I just, look uninteresting. Uh, and then when I'm on stage, I have to be the center of attention. So just to kind of, what I'm really getting people to think about is, what is this moment requiring? Is this moment requiring me to move things forward, or just to kind of, maybe the filler is, as a leader, I should be doing this, the rhythm. I'm not doing the solos. And that's the dynamic I often talk about.
That's such a fascinating way of thinking about teamwork, because I remember people in various teams I've been in that in the actual moment, I think people probably applauded the loudest, the most confident people, often men, who were interrupting, as always. And actually, there were other people who just either had a great energy or they just had a radically different idea. But the question, the reason I mention that is it has a link to inclusion, because people contribute in lots of different ways. Some people can literally bring an experience from completely left field that's different from the norm. And how, as a leader, do you actually encourage it rather than thinking, no, 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 we want creativity. But by the way, there's one tunnel vision way of thinking about it, which often happens. But I want to just pivot for a moment, if I may. I said but rather than and. Uh, given
That's all
your,
right.
yeah, actually, I listened to Hermina. Yes, it's okay. Thank you. She's allowed me to say, but with your comedy hat on, which is maybe on at least most of the time or a lot of the time, when you think of comedy or at least laughter and humor in business, what's your first reaction? Just your quick reaction when you hear those terms together, business and humor, the business
Of
world.
course, I know any group of people will want to laugh together. I know as soon as you say business and humor, people go, you're being frivolous. You're undermining things. You're laughing at, you're outgrouping somebody. You're not including people. And I'm saying that's not humor, that's bullying. So improv is the humor that I would say
Mm,
works in organizations, which is working with what's in the moment, working with what we give each other, rather than, did you hear the one about? And it's a joke that may not be funny or maybe excludes a certain feeling. So that's what I would say. Humor is there all the time. It's just, is it at the back in the smokers or in the coffee bar outside and you're laughing at the boss or the process or the meeting? Or is it in the room and enhancing our collective awareness, our creativity, our psychological safety, our creativity? If we can laugh together, if a leader can role model laughter, where they say, I made a mistake, or oops, what's going on here, or
yes.
crikey, we've got to do it by 3 o'clock. I'll pretend to be ill, or something where it's kind of, for me, picking up Brene Brown, sharing our vulnerability, sharing our fallibility. And this is what people, you've seen the Comedy Store players, we're not perfect. The whole point is we are transparently fallible.
Mm,
She says something, I say something. Oh, we misheard. Am I a chicken or am I Dr. Faustus? I don't know. And that joy of not knowing is wonderful to model and to allow, because from those apparent mistakes or disfluences could come, as you say, some disruptive innovation. And so for me, humor is vital in business. There's a whole chapter about it in my book, but
yes.
I'd go a long way to say this is not jokes, because people come and I do workshops at the Comedy Store, then people stay and see the show and they think I've got to stand up on my own and tell jokes. The very opposite of what I'm talking about. No, you're going to be with somebody else in a pair or six of you, co-creating story, allowing for change. And funny may come. It often does in improv when mistakes happen or
Mm,
somebody can't help but say poo or something. And you can see them not wanting to say it, then it becomes funny. If they'd set out to say that, that would be different. But humor in business is dangerous because we know Dilbert does funny cartoons. That's humor, professional humor, satirizing business. I'm not talking about professional comedians. I'm just saying bring the humor you'd have around your kitchen table with your family on a Friday night with your friends. Bring that to work.
Yes, that's great.
All it is allowing for difference, enjoying fallibility.
I love that. As you're working as teams, you'll be using some form of process, and you've used the word process a few times. I've seen some organizations do it really well, so it's sort of firing, it's infusing the conversation. I've seen others where it's completely dominated, where it's become the experience, and you sort of forget what you're actually doing because there's, I don't know, musicians and artists and balloon throwers and various others. How do you, if you like, design and use the right process to encourage what you've just described?
I listened carefully to the client. And now I've been doing this for over 20 years. And I started out knowing I was over here in terms of management training, leadership development. So I had to justify why I was doing it. And inviting an improv in, they're going to, oh, it's a bit crazy. They want the crazy, but they're not sure where it'll lead. Others, no. Well, let us do drumming. That's safer. Or let us do an outward bound or, build a raft. I always listen to the client. I try and ask them questions. And of course, over the time, there's been a lot of patterns. Teams aren't working well together. We've just been thrown together and they've got their story and they've got their story. And how do we bring a new story together? There's some sort of labeling going on. There's some uncertainty. We don't know how much longer this is going to last. We've moved office or whatever. There may be a throwback from what used to be. There was a leader who was very this, and this new leader wants to be that. So I tend to always listen to what they're saying, write it down, then send them a proposal. And they say, oh, you've got it exactly. And I've just written down what they've said. But I have filtered it through my experience.
Yes.
And also, I've got my my pillar of improv. And that applies to so much because it starts with listening. It starts with listening. It starts with accepting that somebody said something you didn't expect or wouldn't have said yourself. Then you consciously think, how can I accept, and then send something back that builds on what they said, even if I have to disagree. You can disagree as long as you accept their point of view. So you might not say building on that or with respect, because those go the other way, but kind of consciously starting from their point of view. And then I've got this 5-letter mnemonic. The next one is explore assumptions. I've got so many exercises where basically we realize even in the simple, almost childlike games I do in improv, we started with an agenda. The one I mentioned about the one-word story, the zoo. She wants elephant. He's definitely with giraffe. This one's thinking of London Zoo. She's thinking of Singapore Zoo. And even in a game like that, we have a bunch of expectations. We have an agenda. We can't not, because that's what humans are like. And then to finish off laser, we use the word reincorporate or recycle. Isn't it great when we circle back to somebody else's idea they had before, or actually make sense of the story by bringing back a previous offer? Or even I extend it. What if we weren't in hotels? What if we were selling cheese? How would we approach things differently? And I think if you look at a lot of innovations in customer service, they've said, does it always have to be this way?
Yes, it looks through a different lens.
It looks through a different lens. And that's I call reincorporate, which is borrow from the past, borrow from another person's idea. And that's what good leaders are to me, and good facilitators. They're gradually making the story of this team in this moment, even this meeting. And they're bringing back a thing. Oh, actually, David said that thing. Maybe that works now. Or because so many meetings now, there's ideas that get lost. And it may be that you kind of come away 50% satisfied, or you kind of go away, that'll never happen, or, oh no, why did I say yes to that? And you want a meeting where people do feel that they have been listened to, their ideas have been cherished or understood, at least, if they don't work now. And so a clever facilitator is constantly thinking, how can I bring her in? Actually, that idea we lost before, could it bring it back now? Even saying things like, David, that was great when you admitted this, or you said that, or you offered to do this. Wasn't that responsible, adult, generous? Rather than, oh, we better not talk about David and it's going to be embarrassed and a bit cheesed off. So that's almost addressing the unconscious offers, the emotional offers, the shadow stories, the subtext. And if you're a good listener, you're able to use those in a way that can move things forward, I think, because that's basically it. Improv is about listening, acknowledging the reality, but also knowing that what you think is the reality isn't what she saw or heard.
I love that. I love that. Gosh, I'd love to be in some of those sessions right now. Or perhaps
Well,
we
let's
are
do
in
it
our own.
then.
We are in some form ourselves. Let's just flip it. Let's just flip it the other way, because I want people to know what they shouldn't be doing. If you had to pick out 3 barriers or obstacles that people put in the way to stop doing what you just described, what would your top 3 be?
I think it's saying things like, well, take me as I am. That's the way I am. uh, that's the way we always do things around here. This is X company. Sort of thinking there's some sort of script. And I can see the use of Myers-Briggs and Belbin, all these things, but quite often people say, well, I'm an ENTJ. I'm not going to change.
Yeah.
And you think, you're not an ENTJ all the time. It's useful if you know those are your preferences, because she's got a different 4 letters. But don't say, I won't change. Don't say, you've got to do it this way. And also listen to people's unspoken contributions. And we all know how easy it is. And that's why one moment could send somebody into a spiral. So presenting, of course, is a very naked thing. And I will get people who are very accomplished at their job, and then presenting they're scared. And we discover it was because when they were 12 or 22,
Yes.
one person said one thing, and they said, I've had feedback. Who, what, why, when? Well, this one thing happened, and that's colored their view. So feedback, notice it, put it in context. So notice the negative things you've picked up. Notice that you can change and improve. Virtually anything is learnable. Definitely improv is practicable. And don't say, well, that's the way things are done around here. I mean, fair enough. A new person, use this font. That'll help you. That's how we do our spreadsheets. But actually, if you're saying you can't talk to David, the boss, because he's so scary, you can only ask for this, that feels inhibiting. Of course, you don't want to make them look stupid, but I think there's a little bit of noticing that actually most teams are in a dynamic form of evolving.
Yes.
And it's never quite set. And if it is, it's not helpful. And perhaps it's not even actually the way it is, because the team could be set where David doesn't contribute at all. And Neil's doing all the work, or probably not Neil or David, but females. They tend to pick up where we lazy alpha men are busy showing off, taking all the credit. And it's actually other members of the team who are doing the hard work.
Oh, so well said. So well said. Well, let's talk a little bit more about you then. In a nutshell, how easy are you to work with? I know what some creative folk are like, as inverted commas.
Well, I'm not straightforward, I must say. People will think I'm a bit odd when I arrive at a workshop and I say, oh, no. And I try and organize things so there isn't a board table in the middle of the room. I try and organize so I have 2 flip charts. 2.
Radical.
2, because I write names on one and I write what I'm going to write on the other. So I'm a bit of a diva in terms of how does the environment help us learn? I'm a bit bossy sometimes when people say, yeah, I've rehearsed. No, you haven't. You've just looked at it, or you've just done it on the train and put it on your iPhone. And the prep was prepare a 60-second presentation. I don't mind if you haven't written it. I don't mind if you even read it out. We'll get to bullet points later. But if you say, well, I've rehearsed. Well, no, I've looked at some slides. So I'm a bit harsh that way. But generally, I try to model what I'm talking about, which is it's okay to have humor. It's okay to take the mickey out of yourself. Psychological safety is not the same as everyone feeling comfortable.
No, absolutely correct.
Psychological safety says it's okay to try something. And I see all my workshops as a laboratory for me to learn, for an individual, whatever her feeling and state. There may be people who are great at improv and presentation, but they can still learn something. There may be others I have to guide more gently. And of course, my greatest satisfaction is when that person who did admit to being unsure and scared by the afternoon is flying.
Yeah, that's
And this is
wonderful to see,
possible.
isn't it?
I see it all the time. And that's what, makes me happy. That's what when I'm walking away from workshop, I'm on cloud nine because of what she was able to do, how somebody was able to say, okay, this isn't my natural game. I'll have a go because of the people around me. We've allowed for vulnerability and we've taken advantage and moved into a place we didn't expect before. So if you ask the Comedy Store players, I'm a bit grumpy in the dressing room before a show. I'm a bit kind of thinking about my voice and don't want to get too involved. Others want to chat. So I'm not the easiest person, I'm sure. But these are things I can acknowledge about myself. And I tend to
absolutely.
think I'm doing them for a better reason than making other people feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're running a portfolio of different activities and so forth. Any portfolio, well, not any, but most portfolios have ups and downs in terms of how they perform, busyness, and so on. How do you manage that sort of psychologically? Sort of, the good times, the bad times, the fun times. How do you
Well,
deal
I've
with that?
been, fingers crossed, knock on wood, very fortunate. When I started this, 1999, I had two very strong leads. Somebody at Saatchi & Saatchi approached me and said, come and do a workshop. My wife was at a hen night for a McKinsey communications specialist. And so those kind of fell into my lap. I worked really hard at those initial workshops to work out which exercise, how do we debrief, how does it affect what I do in the office the next week? Really hard on the learning. And in fact, as time has gone by, I'm much looser now. It may be that the day evolves in different ways depending on where they are, how they feel, what they say. And gradually, I did less showbiz. So it's a very small part of what I do. Most of my time now is workshops, keynotes, and one-on-one coaching. And with those three strands, I'm plenty busy.
Fantastic.
Of course, during lockdown, it was tricky because there were all those things require people to be in the same room, and often large numbers of people to be in the same room, not least the Comedy Store players. So I had to adapt. And of course, I reached out. And somebody once said, Mike Southern, the Beer Mat entrepreneur, quoting somebody else, said that wealth is what you have if you lost all your money. And I realized I had lots of friends that I knew from this world of learning, development, organization development. I could just say, can help me? And we did some pilots. They taught me about Zoom. They talked about breakouts. They said, do this, try that, have a go. And I did, and I learned. And so now I'm in the fortunate position of I'm still doing stuff on Zoom,
yes,
regionally, globally, and I'm doing face-to-face. So I've actually got more work because those executives that might have found somebody closer to where they are now looking to this funny, fat old Englishman in London to help them. And I can do a 2.5-hour workshop on Zoom. And because I treat it like an improv workshop, lots of energy, lots of interaction, playing with the medium, mucking about a bit, but that means it's kind of entertaining, therefore engaging. So I'm fortunate that when my showbiz career was I'm saying, I don't feel it's really me, but I was able to gradually sort of do less of that, which wasn't appealing to me, into the space I am now, which I love. I really love the work I do, and I get paid for it. That's good. But there's really some work that I don't want to have a go at.
That's fantastic. Would you, if the right opportunity emerged or you created it, would you move back into showbiz in some shape or form? Do you miss it enough?
I don't miss it, really. Of course, I love to watch good telly and theatre and movies and think, yeah, that'd be fun to be involved in that. It tends to be American sitcoms, Seinfeld, Frasier. I love those things, but that requires a great deal of commitment. The writing of that
Yes.
is hard work,
Yeah.
and I'm not going to go there. I just enjoy it as a member of the audience. But there are times when, like, so for example, in 2021, I was in Mike Myers' Netflix show called Pentaveret.
Mm.
And that was quite nice because you get to hang out in a nice environment. You have nice people looking after you, and I had a moustache and people doing my hair and clothes. So you get to be infantilized a little bit. Mike was having to work extremely hard, but I popped in for about 5 days. So that was quite nice to be reminded of being part of a theatre, a group, a company in the theatre on television. That's quite nice. I've got my company, my troupe, my comedy troupe with the Comedy Store Players. So that's something I do think, that'll every now and again. But then often it might involve going away, away from my family, my home. And so I don't miss it, but I do admire really good writing.
That's great to hear. And if you were to look ahead and then look back on your life, what impact are you looking to have on the world around you?
Oh, crikey. One of the things I'm influenced by is provocative therapy, which is, I found from a man called Frank Farrelly, who trained in conventional psychotherapy. And one Friday afternoon, one of his clients in a really tough mental hospital in Wisconsin, he said, "You'll never get out of here." And the guy went, "Yes, I will." And he started thinking, actually, I can use humor to bring people to a better state of mental health. And so they start going, well, actually, I do want to improve. Yes, I want to move beyond where I am. I don't want to be stuck in the frame I've got currently. Anyway, Frank says he used humor to satirize people's self-limiting beliefs. Yeah. So basically, you kind of confront people with, do you really want this? What's holding you back? And he said, and this is why I'm not answering your question, but he said he'd like people to say, Frank Farrelly, he made some people laugh sometimes. I quite like that. I think I'm probably, and he probably would aspire to something more profound than that. And I've never been asked that question, so I'm flailing, David. I think my mind's going, he listens to some people. I think being able to make people laugh and help them make others laugh is really good. I suppose the main thing I try to bring is a sense of self-awareness. Especially in these polarized times, there isn't a strong voice for the people who say, well, I'm not really sure. I've read people say, couldn't we have a political party? Well, I'm not exactly sure. Let's have a go. Well, actually, I agree with him, even though I don't agree with him on other things. So I would like people to be self-aware, perhaps, and improv is about that. He brought some sense of self-awareness and confidence. That's the thing. Confidence that people could be more true to themselves in a way. And sometimes that means finding who you are. Like Herminia Ibarra, again, I'm quoting much cleverer people than me, but she says authenticity is understood perhaps wrongly sometimes. She said, why can't you be authentic to your future self? Isn't that great?
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you're 30, you're thinking, what will be like when I'm 40? Actually, I'm now a leader. I've got to be a leader for other people. And whatever they think leaders do, I've got to sort of work with that rather than I've still got to be true to when I was 21 and I was thinking this and feeling that. I think one's values tend to be similar, but in terms of how you play them and you play your own role, that may change. I suppose that could be my appetite. It gives some people confidence to be more self-aware.
What I'm struck by, is that you are giving people of all backgrounds, types, styles, more of a voice and more of a contribution. And what I'm struck by also is there's proper thought and work and rework and process and so on. This isn't some flippant approach. Similarly, it's not overly engineered and structured. And I think I take a lot from this conversation, as I'm sure listeners and viewers do, in terms of how you go about preparing, being in the moment, following up, interacting with people, creating the conditions where people can give their best or just give of themselves, whether that's the best or not. And we have different hats and identities we wear. Neil, that was a fabulous conversation, at least for me, and I hope you enjoyed it too. The book is wonderful. It really is something that every team leader, individual in an organization, I know once they've read it, think they will use it immediately. And it comes with great insight as well as humor as well, and a real personal voice that comes through. So I'm very grateful for your time today.
Thank you. I'm a little teary. That's so kind of you, David. Thank you. I put a lot of myself into this book. So when people like you say that, I'm delighted. When somebody else said, it's really encouraging. And I wanted people to read the book and think, I could have a go at that. And it's okay. Even if I'm 20, I've got something to learn here. Even if I'm 50, yes, this is something for me to think about. So I'm so touched by that. I might have to just record it and play it to myself every day. Thank you.
Very happy to help, but it's sincere, very sincere. We're going to wrap things up there. We could go on for hours, but respectful of your time and all the fabulous different things you're doing in your life. That was another edition of Lancefield on the Line. I do hope you enjoyed this conversation, this episode, as much as I did. Do check out the other conversations in the series. Give us a wonderful rating if you're feeling generous, and do subscribe. And thank you again, Neil, for your time.
Thank you.